Welcome to the Discovering Eden podcast. My name is Brandon.
I'm Jonathan, sorry.
Guess what? It stays.
I'm Marty.
Welcome to our awkward silence. Anyway, we're going to continue on our series of creatures. This time we're entering into the realm of the dinosaurs. The age of lizards, if you might add.
Rawr.
Put the meme around it's just rawr.
Hold on, does anybody have a T-Rex costume? We should have had it for this.
No, we should have had
but
somebody.
I think it's at home.
Oh, do you have one of those
The big inflatable ones, yeah.
Oh, that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it.
Like, just to start the video, just... They're alive! Anyway, without further ado, we're going to pray because we need it. And we will get right into it.
Lord, we thank you for this time together. We thank you for just being able to discover your creation and kind of dive into these topics and have fun while we're doing it and look at, the seriousness and the lightheartedness of it all. And we just thank you for your creation and that we can look into all these things and things that have been, things that may have been, things that are just unknown, and just all of that is available there, Lord. So we thank you for that again, and ask for your leading in this conversation, and just give us wisdom in that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right. Bumper time.
Woo!
If I can find the bumper. There it is. Alright. So, raise your hands. Who likes dinosaurs? Audience? Oh, wait, we can't see your hands. I know that's really cringe, but guess what? I don't care. Yeah, if you're listening to this on Spotify, raise your hands wherever you're at. If you're driving to work, raise your hand. Just do it safely.
There you go.
I've always liked dinosaurs ever since I was little.
Mm-hmm.
I had the awesome, figures of dinosaurs that you may or may not see later in the video. They may or may not be right next to me at this very moment. But I've always had a fascination with them, to the point of, what's your favorite animal? Oh, a dinosaur. No, we need a living animal, Brandon. Oh. But I like dinosaurs. And then I default to giraffe because, well, you saw that earlier in the series, actually, too. But I wanted to kind of go through kind of what some of our favorite dinosaurs are to start, just to get an idea, and then we'll kind of tie everything into what we talked about last week. So, favorite dinosaur.
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. So I was also a dinosaur kid for the longest time, and I used to have these like stuffed dinosaurs, like stuffed animal ones. And my favorite one was the Stegosaurus. And so the Stegosaurus has always been kind of my favorite dinosaur. And that is
Stegosaurus.
I just think he's cool. And yeah, it was my favorite of the stuffed animals that I had, so personal bias towards it.
There you go. So since it's coming out and kind of made its way in there, actually the Triceratops was one of mine too.
So the Triceratops, I don't know how well you can see that, guys. Yeah, Triceratops. And it's also my favorite, so any of the ceratopsians, really. But Triceratops, just because of how unique. I know, like, the fan favorite answer is probably like, oh, T-Rex,
Yeah,
all
of
the way.
course.
You got the inflatables, you got Jurassic Park, Jurassic World now, and then all the sequels they keep making. Um, I feel like it's a little bit overrated. Another underrated one that I have is Velociraptor, but also kind of gotten overplayed a little bit with Jurassic Park.
Yep.
I always liked the Velociraptor. Archaeopteryx is another favorite of mine. Or, you have Parasaurolophus just because it's a really wacky looking thing. And, yeah, hollow bones.
There you go.
Yeah. But if I had to pick a favorite, be this guy. Be that guy right there. Triceratops. So as we were talking about last week, and I know Marty, you weren't here, but you watched.
I did. I'm caught up.
He's caught up. Oh man, I lost my spot. Okay. Anyway. from some of the evidence that we were kind of showing in like Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14, we see that like any great lizard shows up. And obviously there's going to be people that are like, oh, but that could have been a crocodile, or that could have been, all these other things. But at least to me, I think that is a depiction of dinosaurs in the Bible. And it's not the only place that we see this kind of dinosaur interaction within different evidences, not just strictly in the Bible, but in other, if you want to call them mythologies or different texts, whatever, cave paintings, whatever. They're depicted elsewhere, and I know there's some people that say, oh, they came up with some of these mythologies and stuff off of the bones of the dinosaurs. So, like, people that think of dragons are like, oh, they simply made it up because they saw these bones and they fantasize what it could have been.
Yeah, that kind of leads into just, like, something that I saw when I was researching was, like, in the Mediterranean, like, these big bones. They're like, well, those might be like the Titans or the,
like,
Greek heroes
like,
sort of thing.
For example, like a mammoth, for example.
Yeah.
That's a cyclops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So different things like that, and that's what people were assuming for some of these things. I'm like, oh, that's surely how they came up with some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's quite the case with some of the things that we're going to be talking about in this series, especially dragons later on. I mean, and honestly, dragons and dinosaurs are often synonymous a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Which we'll get into the next episode when we talk about the differences between dinosaurs and dragons. But this is just the dinosaurs part, and I honestly think they existed alongside humans. And that includes your dinosaurs that we know of today, but they were definitely few in number. And maybe that's a big take.
I mean, it's always fascinating when you look at, like, you brought up cave paintings as such. That how many times you see cave paintings of people hunting dinosaur type creatures, or dragons or whatever you want to call them.
Mm-hmm.
Again, interchangeable.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Now, I don't have any of the pictures with me, but there's plenty of stuff on the internet. Obviously, I try to avoid the things that are clearly fake, because I don't want to just show things that are clearly not legit.
Yeah.
But it always intrigued me, especially with my fascination of dinosaurs and dragons. Like, what if they actually existed further than we think they did?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know there's some people that like rank things on, oh, the survivability, like they lasted past their extinction point, different things like that. Dinosaurs, for me, easily 100% lasted longer than their extinction point, or designated extinction point. Including the ones that we think of like the big names. I think they live, some of them I should add, lived past the extinction point. Obviously, some people today are like, the T-Rex. Yep, that's a chicken today. They're birds. The living relatives of dinosaurs, the birds. I'm like, it's not entirely wrong from an evolutionary standpoint. It's not wrong per se. If you're gonna go into that, and I'll explain a little bit later why. But it's also not right. I don't think riddle me this. How do you go from a T-Rex to a chicken? And no, I'm not talking about the Dino nuggets. It boggles my mind because they look nothing alike.
Yeah.
And I know, in more recent studies or whatever, they think the T-Rex could have had feathers and been more raptor-like. But a very, very, very large raptor.
Yeah.
Which I don't necessarily disagree with. But obviously, in the things that we had as kids, well, they're scaly.
Yeah.
They don't have feathers. Could you imagine a a Triceratops with feathers?
Feels like something I would hunt in Monster Hunter.
Yeah.
But it's just it's interesting. And I think they did exist at some point. It's just they got outperformed by some of the mammals and stuff, especially with kind of the age of everything slowing down, which we'll get to later. Because reptiles pretty much continuously grow the longer they live.
Mhm.
They get bigger. You see this with crocodiles. You see this with some of these other reptilians. Not all reptilians do. So some kind of grow to a certain point and then stop. But then there's some of these others that continually grow and grow and grow and grow.
Mhm.
The dinosaurs, to me, would have done the exact same thing. And then through, something you see in the Bible, and I'm linking this again to biblical evidence. Though obviously it's extrapolation at this point. So obviously I ain't there at the time. I don't have no time machine. I can't go back to this time. But I do believe when it said that some of these people that are mentioned in the Bible, that such and such lived for 200 something years, some such and such lived for 300 something years. But at a certain point, and it's at Noah, when those numbers drop significantly back down to the numbers that we're typically used to, with Moses being the last highest age. Which is interesting, and obviously this doesn't necessarily correlate with the timelines that we know of in Egyptology with the pharaohs and how long they reigned, quote unquote. So it leaves a little bit up in the air. So I'm not saying this is one thing or another, because some people think it's this lineage, or it's this it's this patriarchy line.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Which I guess it's understandable. But then how do you get the Israelites? Then that lasts for thousands of years. Then wouldn't they be a whole lot longer? But why would you change it up in between?
Right.
Halfway through Genesis?
Yeah.
Well, not even halfway.
Yeah, 12 chapters.
12 chapters, yeah. It's just an interesting thing to ponder. I'm not trying to say I know everything that there is about it, because I don't. But I just think it's a little interesting and could explain some of the things for dinosaurs of maybe that's why they aren't as large as we see them, and they had to adapt to their sizes, to the environment, to be able to still linger on.
Yeah.
Obviously, do we see the dinosaurs that we did way back when? No. And if anything, they would be much, much smaller if they did maintain that same species kind of line.
Yeah.
And there is a particular one that I think could have potentially still lived on. The one that we like actually think of like, oh, this is a true dinosaur, which is the Mokele Membe, which is kind of a local traditional view of like an animal that's in the Congo. And I there's some mega stuff in there potentially. We'll kind of look into it at some point later in the series, but upon doing research, there's a lot bigger stuff in there than I thought there was. With a potential like 40, 50-foot snake.
Yeah.
Which is kind of unheard of. And people would obviously not believe you. Which I didn't believe it either at first. Yeah, jumping at the helicopter in World War II. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, because even anacondas and, they will only grow to be what, 30 feet?
20,
20,
21,
yeah.
22.
Okay.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. I know we're getting a little off track here, so I'll try to get us back.
Get us back to the Dino Nuggets.
Back to the Dino Nuggets. Speaking of, if dinosaurs existed, what do you think they take the form of today? Dino Nuggets is a valid answer.
We're going there.
Yeah, let's cheap dinner from Walmart.
Yeah.
And for me, like something like the monitor lizards
Mm-hmm.
are very reminiscent of, well, dinosaurs.
Sure.
Like, for example, the crocodile monitor, the croc monitor, is something that looks very dinosaur-like and something that I think is a little interesting. And I would love to see like an actual living dinosaur to know if it's actually the case. They have some wicked teeth, the croc monitors do, but they're completely hidden. So you do not see it on a living crocodile monitor until they bite something. So you don't see it at all.
I'm just looking at a picture of it so I can, for a reference, and
so
I can get it.
So picture like a gecko, and you don't think geckos have teeth like at all. Imagine that, and then it chomps on you, and it has like incisors about the size of your finger.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's crazy. Imagine that's how the T-Rex looked. Like just think of like a granny.
Oh, it's gonna
Granny
T-Rex.
I just thought that was interesting.
Right.
I'm like, I kind of want to know the science behind that to see if that's actually a legit thing that it could have been.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't know. We only have a skeletal remains of it, so you don't have any of the flesh along with it.
Right.
Or another thing that I always thought was interesting, they're always called serpents, like different things like that. Whether that's dinosaurs, dragons, whatever. Like, or at least when I'm talking about the, like in biblical stuff, like everything's called serpentine, different things like that. And kind of that goes to the coining of the term dinosaur, dragon.
Yeah.
Which I guess I'll talk to you after I ramble on anymore. Crap, and I just forgot what I was talking about. Never mind. So we're going to talk about when the term dinosaur was coined. So I know I put it down in the document, but do any of you know off the top of your head when it was termed?
I know it was like mid 1800s because I think it was always dragon before that, serpent or dragon, and then like mid 1800s went to dinosaur.
Yeah, I would lean. I don't know off the top of my head, but I would lean 1840 something, maybe 1850.
Yeah. Sounds right.
Yeah. So I put the actual date here. It's 1842.
Okay.
Yep.
Which is when it was coined by Sir Richard Owen, denoting from the Greek dinos, meaning fearfully great, and sauros, meaning lizard. So, fearfully great lizard or terrible lizard.
Which, I think everybody has heard that, you know.
Definition of it.
Yeah.
The definition of dinosaur.
Yeah.
And that didn't come until 1842. So, this is where this obviously distinction, which we'll talk about next episode of dinosaurs and dragons. There's a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
Because, well, things weren't termed dinosaurs back then, because dinosaur was only around from 1842 onward.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then even dragon goes way further back than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
At least with the idea. And obviously it goes more along the serpentine route.
Yep.
But, yeah. I always thought that was interesting. And let's see. If there was a percentage that you would say for dinosaurs, I mean, and obviously we all think dinosaurs exist in some facet,
Yeah.
ancestry-wise.
Yep.
But what percentage do you give of dinosaurs being how they used to be, if there's still any remaining in the world?
Like how,
Like,
meaning like size and
or at least somewhat similar. So if you're seeing a Stegosaurus, for example, but just maybe not as big.
so one that's about that size.
Well, in that case, he's right here. Roll off the red carpet.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, you look at kind of an evolutionary or change over time kind of thing, and as we talked about already, how lizards came from all that, or there's such similarities. In some regard, like 100% on one end, something that's exactly like this, I'm gonna go 0, but so it's
Yeah, I don't know if we'd see something, like that, what you'd see in like a Jurassic Park.
Yeah, exactly.
But do I think that they exist to some extent, maybe, and we just don't know about them? I think there's a chance.
Yeah.
I wouldn't doubt it necessarily. And we kind of talked about it last week, a little bit, in that they probably exist, but not in the sense that we know them.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It is a tough one.
Flip a coin.
That's the real.
Like for me, like especially with the Mokele Membe,
Mhm.
which I give pretty heavy weight to, because they were also the pygmy hunters that actually described like the okapi and different other animals in the Congo, and then scientists were like, nah, it's ridiculous, until they actually found exactly what they were talking about. And they're like, oh, that's a thing.
Yeah.
I can't rule it out, so therefore it's not 0. I will say it's not incredibly high, because of dinosaurs that would remain the same size, or at least somewhat close, is in very, very few areas on Earth.
Yeah. You have to have an ecosystem to sustain
To me, the
it.
only 2 ecosystems that can sustain that is the Amazon or the Congo, and that is it. Full stop. And where is the Mokele Membe? The Congo. And I say like it could still be on like the Congo area, because Africa is relatively hasn't changed position in like all of Pangea moving and everything. It's kind of stayed relatively consistent. So, of everything that would have been there initially would still be on that continent. Obviously, the Sahara used to be really lush. It turned into a desert. So that's going to force whatever was living there to go one way or another. Some went down, maybe some went across when Pangea... I don't really know. It's all speculative at this point. So some of them may have gone over to where the Amazon is now, because we know that Africa and South America were combined at one point. They got a nice puzzle piece aspect to it. So they could have been one or the other. Also could have been tied down to Antarctica. Obviously, clearly nothing is living there anymore. Considering we're nice and cold-blooded.
We're talking
They'd be
about,
real cold.
yeah, we're talking about T-Rexes becoming chickens. Maybe they became penguins.
Maybe the ones that move down south.
Yeah.
So I would say there's probably a 20% chance. 20% chance of actual megafauna dinosaurs existing. And some of it's because some of these places are absolutely massive, and we just don't know everything there is about it. And for the Mekele-Membe specifically, it's a sauropod of some type. So something you would think of like an apatosaurus, something a long neck. So think Littlefoot. That kind of dinosaur.
Yeah.
And something that I thought was fascinating is some of the highest trees in the world
Are in the Congo.
Yep. I find that interesting.
Mhm.
And it kind of helps support some of the other things, especially as well, is if there is actual megafauna snakes as well. If there is a 50-foot snake in the Congo, why couldn't there be megafauna in there? Obviously, you think it's ridiculous. You're like, oh, we would have found it by now. That's not necessarily true. I mean, in the ocean, you have plenty of examples of, oh, look, we found something big. Hi, colossal squid.
Right.
Just like that. Obviously, the ocean's a little bit different animal, as in clearly anything. Like anything water-based, I think already has an astronomically higher chance of still being out there. Personally.
I would agree with that, just because it's the biggest unknown, you know?
Yes.
It makes up around 70% of our planet, and we've hardly scratched the surface.
Yeah.
Well, I just feel like it's continuous, like, oh, here's something new, here's something new, here's something new.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Yeah,
When
and
is
we can only go
something new?
so
Yeah.
far deep.
Yeah.
What other deep things are down there? And usually, at these depths, what do? Well, they don't get smaller. They get bigger.
Right.
They gigantify. So if you're asking me, oh, why haven't we found this yet? Well, it's a good way you can miss things still. But
So the sea chicken dinosaur is at the bottom of the
Get caught!
There's the T-Rex.
That's Leviathan, actually. That's what it is. It's a T-Rex that actually grew flippers.
There we go.
Because it was upset that its hands
Just
were
got the
so
little
long.
pennies on.
It's Nemo. That's what T-Rex is. That's just Finding Nemo. You see a T-Rex. What happened? I evolved with this flipper, but
Yeah,
this
it's
one's
just kind of rotating in circles.
this one didn't work so well. No, but anyway. So anything like T-Rex, I don't think is around.
Yep.
The only other place I would think it could be, like anything predatory could still be around, would be the Congo.
Yeah.
Or the Amazon. And I'm probably leaning more toward the Congo than the Amazon. Because I didn't hear of anything dinosaur related in the Amazon, but I did hear it in the Congo. And if something actually grows to massive sizes, there has to be some massive predator to take it out.
Right.
It just makes sense from a balancing ecosystem perspective.
Mhm.
Just common sense. Which is also why I think like blue whales are kind of an oddball. Like, oh, it's the biggest thing on Earth, and nothing hunts them. like something like that. I'm like, something's got to go after them. They're not gonna give free reign. If you're gonna say like great whites don't go after it, well, that's the biggest thing in the ocean. Or is it? Like, I don't know. Well, we're gonna go away from that because that's a conversation for later. That's a rabbit hole for later. But yeah, these guys are cool. I always thought they were cool. Something I actually looked up right before getting here actually, and honestly, kind of looks more of like what you would think a quote-unquote dragon would look like. So, I don't know if you want to pull this up on your phone or anything. Look up I think it's called the crocodile lizard or crocodile gecko. One of those two. Funny how crocodile's like in all of it.
When I search crocodile gecko, all I get is the Moorish gecko. Is that what you're thinking of, or is it something separate?
It's separate. I think it's called the crocodile gecko or something. It's like newly in like the pet trade or whatever. I don't know whether it's a gecko or not, but it's some lizard. It basically looks like a mini dragon with no wings. But it's got like the scaling and everything, like say like an ankylosaur would have. But that kind of scaling on it.
Is this it?
No.
No.
I'm gonna have to get my phone out. What an interesting episode. Everybody's on their phones.
Right.
Or is it this?
No.
No. Then I have no idea what you're talking about because those are the only things popping up.
About this one.
Yes, that's it.
Crocodile skink.
Skink. That's what it is. Crocodile skink. It had crocodile in the name.
Yeah.
That's all I remembered.
Okay, yeah, no, I see it now.
Yeah.
So so anybody listening in or watching this video, pull up crocodile skink and you'll know what we're referring to. That's a baby dino. It's just really small.
Yeah, it's handheld.
Like if you're
I mean,
talking,
it's about this size.
yeah, that would be your modern day dino. They're not big.
I can see that.
They're adapting. And something I know I mentioned to Jonathan after recording the last episode is something that I've always kind of thought was interesting is there's certain voids that certain animals fill of different niches that disappear. So, for example, take the Triceratops. I was almost going to say for example again. They have horns, multiple, sometimes one, sometimes two, sometimes three, or more, or on their frills, or whatever it is. But they have horns, and one thing that they would do is charge at enemies to protect their young or themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it really interesting that there's a similar animal that fills that same niche and kind of environment that they would have been in.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the rhinoceros. And looks honestly very similar in its build. It kind of looks a little scaly, even though it's not scaly. And it's a mammal. But isn't it interesting that it takes up that same niche after these giant lizards are gone? And I feel like there's other animals that take up different niches of some other things as well. Obviously, scientists, we still don't know what this thing does.
Yeah.
We knew it had, like, plates on its back. Is it for warming? Is it for mating? What is it?
Or does it roll up in a ball like Sonic the
There
Hedgehog?
you
Just take on and roll. Like, it's interesting things like that. And obviously, this is kind of the direction we think that a lot of the dinosaurs went. Like, similar to like what this is, the Microraptor or Archaeopteryx. They went in a direction of more avian-like. And I would agree with that. They adapted, and possibly you think of like ice ages. Well, they had to get warm somehow, so they have feathers. Different things like that. Obviously, I'm definitely going off of the... Like, I'm not on the geologic timescale at this point. Like, for me, it would make sense for them to adapt feathers when it gets colder. It just makes sense to me. And they get smaller because, well, they don't grow as big anymore. Because the time changed. So they can't grow as big as they used to. So they got to adapt. What do? They take to the air. They flee. Some of the mammals were starting to come up. So you have your lions and tigers and things that were starting to become the apex predators. So they take to the air. And some of them didn't. And I think the ones that didn't were more you're closely related to your T-Rex. Things that can't fly. So, obviously, when we think of things that can't fly today, we think of the emu, we think of the ostrich, things like that. But there used to be way bigger birds out there. In South America, there used to be something called the terror bird, which was massive, like would snap a capybara in half with its beak. Another big bird that's a predatory bird that is still around today is called the shoebill heron, which is about as close as you can get to what the terror bird was.
Right.
Obviously, it's not near as big as it used to be. And then you have other birds like the moa, but the moa in New Zealand was a lot more herbaceous. Oh, I don't want to say herbaceous. It's not an herb, but it ate plants.
Herbivorous, maybe.
Yeah, that's what I was going for, but I almost said herbaceous, and I'm like, that's not it.
One word.
It's actually a plant.
Like basil.
Maybe that's why they were good. Because you have host eagles that would go after these moas, and these moas were 10 feet tall. So, there's some massive stuff out there that I think were more of your descendants of these dragons as they adapted to their environments. Mm-hmm. And in places such as, Australia, New Zealand, some of these more isolated areas, they remain longer because there's nothing else to take them out. So, until humans came, that is. then they became, dino nuggets. But that's why it's interesting. Something I found out when I was researching, there used to be a really, really big, I guess you could maybe call it a monitor lizard in Australia, but they live with Aboriginal people, and think of Dimetrodon without the sail. That's what it was and how big it was.
Interesting.
And was venomous. Because, we know, Australia, everything there wants to kill you.
Yep.
And they used to have both terrestrial and aquatic crocodiles. And those crocodiles on land were also really big. It's crazy. Obviously, the closest thing that we can think of today to modern dinosaurs would be your crocodiles, because they're that semi-aquatic. They can escape into the water when something bad happens.
Yep.
But they've adapted to that, but they've kind of been relatively unchanged for that chunk of time. Obviously, you have Dinosuchus, the massive, massive croc. Historically, I don't know. I mean, I can geek out about all this kind of stuff way too much. I'll have to call an episode somewhere. But let's see. What did we not? And oh yeah, I have a literal thing on the screen behind here that I completely didn't go to. So here's the differences between some of the dinosaurs and their types, and why they kind of went two separate directions, and why you have your more bird-like ones and you have your more lizard-like ones. So I'm going to switch to that real quick because I'm dumb and I forgot to do it a long time ago. Guess what? We wing it. Maybe I shouldn't wing it, but we're winging it. And here it is. So this is part of the slideshow. You're kind of getting a sneak peek. I can't do anything. Sneak peek of some of the other things that we're going to be doing. So you have your two main types of dinosaurs here, which is from your types, the Saurich. Wow, I'm going to butcher these. So the Saurischia and Ornithischia. Like I said, I butchered them.
Sounds right to me.
Which basically means the first one being lizard-hipped and bird-hipped being the other one. although it's a bit different because the ones where the birds actually came from were the ones that were lizard hipped, and then the ones that were lizards were from bird hipped ones. So it's a little bit of an interesting oddity there, which I found. I'm like, wow, you couldn't just name it the other way to begin with, but okay. And then obviously some of the major dinosaur groups that we know of that go as follows. You have their theropods, which would be like your Allosaurus, your T-Rex, things like that. So your big, predatory, not necessarily bipedal, but typically that's what you would think of. And then I wanted to put this next one in here just because I thought it was interesting as we go into kind of the dragon approach. I don't even want to try to say that. Coelosaurs, Cerulosaurs, or I'm butchering it regardless. But it's also a part of the theropod, so also predatory. Light hollow bones, much like birds today. So they have hollow bones, which means they don't fossilize that well. And they're lighter, which makes them move either faster or that they're able to take flight if flight allows. So something in this way that I think that could have came from this, you could have had your things like terror bird, some of your flightless predatory birds, like massive birds. Also, another thing that I think that would fit into this example would be dragons. If dragons actually are a separate thing. Or if they're just a subspecies of what dinosaurs are, which is more or less what I would think, which is we titled them differently because dinosaurs are 1842 and onward.
Yeah.
I feel like they're pretty much the same thing, they're just slightly different. You have your sauropods, which would be like your apatosaurs, your big megafauna. Eat some treetops. You got your ornithischians, so Stegosaurus being one of them. Some of your more beaked dinos, so things with beaks or different things that they have alongside. There's many other types, but I was like putting different ones that I feel like some people would understand and recognize. Ceratopsians, much like Triceratops, and Chylosaurs, much like, well, the namesake. And then Pachycephalosaurs, again, the namesake. And honestly, something I thought of randomly, I'm like, maybe that's where they got the kappa from. If they're thinking of, oh, they take something from a bone and then come up with it in mythology, I'm like, well, the kappa has just a bald head that looks exactly like, Pachycephalosaurus head. Right. So, I don't know. I guess you could maybe make the argument there, but anyway. Let's do that. Head back here, and boom.
Oh, we're back.
We're back. Hello, guys. So, I know the next episode we're going to tie into, we're going to record it after this, but we're going to tie into the relationship between dinosaurs and dragons, and then we're kind of going to go from there. But I think this will be it for this video. There's obviously plenty more we could say, but we'll leave it here because otherwise I'm going to be rambling for quite a long time. But anyway, that'll be it for this video. Thank you again for watching. And catch us next week as we go into the similarities and differences of dinosaurs and dragons.
I'm sure there'll be plenty of rambling on dragons.
That's why there's 4 episodes.
Exactly.
All right. See
you
you
later.
Bye, guys.